There are a few crime writers in the UK who truly become household names, and right at the top of the list is Ian Rankin. Terrific writer, really lovely guy, very smart, and I think you're going to find that whatever you write, you're going to learn something from watching him in the author's studio. So welcome Ian.
Get lucky. I don't think one does it. One tip doesn't do it. There's an element of luck involved. Not in becoming a successful novelist, but just getting published. My first Rebus novel was turned down by the first 5 publishers it was sent to, and it was only sent to 6 publishers. The luck was that I'd actually had an introduction to publisher number 6, because he was the editor of a writer I knew, and so I was not a completely unknown quantity to him. So, a little bit of luck. Black and Blue was the first Rebus novel that I felt satisfied with, completely satisfied with. The previous books had been an apprenticeship, getting to know the character, getting the feel for Edinburgh and what I want to say about Edinburgh, getting to know the crime novel and what you can and possibly can't do with it. By the time I got to Black and Blue, I was a bit more confident, and I pushed myself a little bit harder, and it was a much bigger theme, much bigger book, more complex, and it won the Gold Dagger. And so it actually said to my publisher, because at that time I was mid-list, said to my publisher, this guy knows what he's doing, let's put a little bit of marketing muscle behind him. And that helped that book to sell 4 times as many copies as previous books, which made me think, yes, Ian, you can make a go of this. I've been inspired by everything. I mean, when I was a kid, I used to read thrillers, so it was Alistair MacLean, all those great boys' own adventure stories that got turned into Hollywood movies in the 60s and 70s. And he was Scottish, I didn't know that, even though his name is very Scottish. I just didn't conceive that a Scottish author could be a best-selling thriller writer. So I was influenced by those. Later on, it was Jekyll and Hyde was a big influence, sort of trying to retell the story of Jekyll and Hyde and bring it back to contemporary Edinburgh, because it was written by an Edinburgh author, but he chose to set it in London. And around the same time as I was getting interested in the theme of Jekyll and Hyde, of good and evil being contained within the same person, I also got into William McIlvanney. Now, he was a literary novelist, but he'd written 3 crime novels set in Glasgow. And I thought, well, I could do that in Edinburgh. I shall write a crime novel set in Edinburgh that will take on the theme of Jekyll and Hyde. I'm very jealous of writers who can write anywhere. I can't write anywhere. I can't write when I'm on tour. I can't write when I'm on holiday. I can't write when I'm away from home. Luckily, I've got 2 homes now, so I've got a bit of flexibility. But mostly I write upstairs in this. This is my house in Edinburgh. There's a bedroom upstairs. It's now my office. And usually it's between January and June I write the book. If I'm doing a book a year, it's usually conceived October, November, December, start writing it in January. It's done by June. So it takes about 6 months to do, and I write pretty much every day. The first draft takes somewhere between 30 and 40 days and is rough. But it just does the plot work. And once I know the plot works, everything else can be fixed or is fixable. Characters can become 3-dimensional, they're not ciphers anymore, which they pretty much are in the first draft. Nobody sees my first draft, it's horrible. It's a bit like a butcher's slab. Everything's got to be put back together again into a recognisable animal. But I write every day when I'm writing the book, just because that injects pace. And if I'm not writing in Edinburgh, and I tend not to start the books in Edinburgh because there are too many interruptions, people coming to interview me and the doorbell going and the postman coming. So I've got this little house we've got in Cromarty in the northeast of Scotland, which has no mobile phone signal and no TV. And I just shut myself away there for a few weeks and start the book. Chocolate is a guilty pleasure. Because I don't smoke, I tend to binge chocolate bars when I'm writing books. So I can put on a lot of weight when I'm writing. My wife, for a while, bless her, would buy 5 packs of Mars bars and Snickers because that was cheaper than buying them individually, until she realised that if she bought 5, I would eat 5 in a day. So she stopped doing that. But I don't feel that guilty about it. I mean, I am trying to cut back, but I am a demon for chocolate and kind of ridiculous snacks of any kind, really. I like pubs, but I don't feel guilty about that. I spend far too much money on records. I don't feel at all guilty about that. And I do love the novels of Julie Cooper, and I also don't feel guilty about that. And every time I mention her in print or in an interview, she sends me a lovely letter or a card. Panic, is that a ritual? I mean, I'll do anything to put off the evil moment when I actually have to sit down and start a book or start writing. I'll alphabetize my records and CDs, I'll reorganize my books, I'll tidy up a lot, I'll make sure that's my phone going. It could be a film director, who knows, probably not though. You know, I'll do anything to avoid the moment. But no, when I do start writing, you know, I'll probably have a fresh supply of post-it notes, because when I start the book, you know, page one, I need some characters' names. Okay, what are they called? And once I've decided who the characters are, I'll scribble their names on the post-it note so that I don't forget. And then slowly the table and the wall get covered in post-its with what should happen next, what I need to go back and fix, who's called this, where this person crops up. Very old-fashioned, Peter. I've got a very old laptop that's basically powered by coal and has no internet access on it, but it does me, in fact, it's just on its last legs. I'm getting a new laptop for my birthday, which is in a few days' time from now, because my old laptop, sadly, is about to go to be cremated. Always wanted to be an author, always was an author. I mean, from that very early age. Weren't many books in the house. My parents were kind of working class people, didn't read many books, but I was allowed to read as many comics as I liked. Comics in the 60s were cheap, affordable literacy and attractive to boys. So all the war comics, Commando comics, the Victor, the Hotspur, the Dandy, the Beano, the Lion, the Tiger, I got all of them. And there were just a few pennies. And I don't know, as a kid I was a bit of a control freak, so it wasn't enough just to read comics, I wanted to write my own. So the first things I ever tried doing were writing comics. I would get bits of paper and fold them in half, make little 4-page booklets, break them up into squares, put little stick figures in them. I'd have a space story, a war story, a football story. I would put free gifts on the front to try and entice people to buy them, and I only ever made one copy of each. But I was no good at drawing. And then I got infatuated with pop music, and again I couldn't play an instrument, but I invented a band that existed only on paper and in my head called the Amoebas, and I would write all the lyrics. And from the lyrics of the Amoebas came the poetry. And the first thing I ever had published was a poem when I was in high school, a poem called Euthanasia. So even then, at the age of 17, I had quite a dark imagination. I've interviewed a lot of writers about this. I don't plan books. I mean, some of us do and some of us don't. Some of us feel the need and some of us don't. Some of us do 300-page synopses and some of us do a 2 or 3-page synopsis. I've got a vague idea of a theme I want to explore. I find a plot that allows me to do that. Sometimes it is ripped from the pages of newspapers and current affairs. So there might be the germ of something that has actually happened. It's somewhere in the world and it's got me thinking about the way the world is. And I just replant that story in Edinburgh or in Scotland. And then I start, and sometimes I don't know who the killer is, I don't know what's going to happen, I almost never know what's going to happen. I know kind of what I would like the end point of the book to be, but very often the book has different ideas. So during the course of writing the first draft, minor characters become major characters become minor characters. The book seems to know where it wants to go, and that's a much more interesting journey than the one I had planned. So I just grab on for dear life and fly by the seat of my pants. It's probably the same one you hate being asked. Where'd you get your ideas? I remember years ago, I was doing an event with Val McDermott. We got asked that by someone in the audience, and she said, "Well, crime writers get their ideas from a site on the internet that sells us ideas for £10 a book." And the person came up afterwards and said, "What's the web address of that site?" Where'd you get your ideas from? Or what, people think, oh, if I've got the right kind of pen or the right kind of word processing equipment or the right kind of computer, I can be a writer. And it ain't like that. There's an element of magic involved in writing, I think. And this is why it's very difficult. I spent a bit of last year being visiting professor of creative writing at the University of East Anglia. And I said from the get-go, I don't think you can teach creative writing. If you've got the gift, I can maybe help you along or help you progress, but I can't turn you into a writer. You can't do that. it's not like teaching someone to learn a language or to do mathematics. You just can't do it. But the one thing I did say to all these students is try and have some fun, because I think all these courses, you tend to treat it as an academic pursuit. And when I approach writing, I approach it in the same way I approached it when I was 10 or 12 years old. It's a fun hobby where I get to play God and play with my imaginary friends and have the control of life. I've got life and death over my characters, and that is very therapeutic. So it keeps you young. It's why crime writers are essentially just children who refuse to grow up. I don't think so. I mean, touch wood. I've got ideas for books that I haven't written. I've never quite felt able to write them, or books where I've worked a plot out to such a degree in my head that I didn't feel the need to write the book. I write the first draft of the book to try and work out what the story is, and if I do it too well in my head, I don't need to write the book. I've got one unpublished novel, my first novel, Summer Writes, has never been published. I found the manuscript a few years ago in the bottom of a box. I've got one book that was published in hardcover and paperback just once, and I didn't allow them to reprint it, called West Wind, because I wasn't happy with it. So those are kind of lost works, I suppose. But if you mean work that you've written down and it's been burnt in a fire, or you sent it off in the post and it never came back, no. And I've been very fortunate, because Summer Writes, when I wrote it, I was a student and I couldn't afford to photocopy it. So I would blithely put the manuscript, the physical typescript, the only copy I had, into an envelope and send it off to publishers, and it would come back 6 weeks or 8 weeks later saying no thanks. And I would send it off again. And the only thing I've got is the original typescript, no photocopy, even now.
It was great doing that interview with you in your stunning Edinburgh home, Ian. Thank you for sharing those amazing insights, which show us all why you are the UK's #1 crime writer. If you've enjoyed watching Ian, do please like and share this interview.